Hürtgen Forest, November 1944. The undergrowth exploded with gray-green uniforms. Private Leo Vance had been mid-step when the first German paratrooper materialized from behind a fallen pine. Then another rose to his left. A third appeared on his right. Fallschirmjäger, Germany's elite, close enough to see the determination in their eyes. 3 MP-40 submachine guns swinging toward him. Vance had less than 2 seconds to respond. His hand found the fire selector on his Browning automatic rifle. Slow setting, the safe mode, the one the Army approved. Or fast setting, the forbidden mode, the one every instructor said would send his bullets into the treetops while the Germans cut him in half. His thumb moved. Click. Fast. Click. And now the next 5 seconds would prove whether the Army manual was right, or whether Leo Vance had discovered something the experts missed. The Browning automatic rifle arrived in the final months of World War I. John Moses Browning, the legendary firearms designer, created it to solve a specific problem. American troops were crossing no man's land with bolt-action rifles. They needed portable automatic firepower that could move with advancing infantry. The bar was his answer. A magazine-fed automatic rifle that one soldier could carry and fire. Revolutionary for its time. But revolutionary came with complications. By World War II, the BAR had evolved into the M1918A2 variant. Nearly 20 pounds loaded with a full magazine, each chambered in the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge, the same round used in the Army's main battle rifle. That power came at a cost. Recoil. The .30.06 kicked hard in a bolt-action rifle. In a fully automatic weapon firing hundreds of rounds per minute, that kick became a serious problem. The Army's solution was the rate of fire selector. 2 settings. Slow, roughly 350 rounds per minute. Fast, nearly 600 rounds per minute. Slow was manageable. A trained soldier could control the weapon on slow, keeping rounds reasonably on target even during extended bursts. Fast was different. At 600 rounds per minute, the weapon bucked so violently that the muzzle climbed with every shot. Fire a burst on fast while standing and your first round might hit the target. Your second would go high. Your third would disappear into the sky. And the training manuals were explicit. Fast fire was prohibited during standing engagements. The setting existed for emergencies only. Final protective fire from prepared positions, preferably prone with the bipod deployed. Standing fire on fast setting was considered a waste of ammunition at best. At worst, it would get you killed while your bullets went everywhere except the enemy. Private Leo Vance stood 5 feet 5 inches tall. When he weighed himself at the Camp Shelby Induction Center, the scale read 138 pounds. The sergeant recording the measurement looked at him, looked at the number and said nothing. There was nothing to say. Vance was small. That was simply a fact. When weapon assignments came, Vance drew the BAR. His squadmates assumed it was a mistake. Someone screwed up the paperwork. That thing weighs more than his leg. Runt's gonna be walking point 3 feet behind us while he drags that anchor. The nickname stuck. Runt was the polite one. Anchor was the common one because his squadmates figured the heavy weapon would slow the entire squad's movement. The squad leader, Sergeant Morrison, pulled Vance aside after the first day of training. "Look, I can try to get you reassigned. Get you on a Garand like everyone else." Vance shook his head. "I can handle it, Sergeant." Morrison studied him for a long moment. Something in Vance's voice, quiet confidence, maybe stubbornness, made him pause. "All right, but if you can't keep up, we'll revisit this." Vance never fell behind. While other soldiers spent their evenings playing cards, Vance disappeared to the weapons cleaning area. He sat with the BAR across his knees. He stripped it, studied every component, reassembled it, stripped it again. The weapon was complex, more complex than the standard M1 Garand his squadmates carried. The gas system, the fire selector mechanism, the recoil spring assembly. Vance learned it all. But he wasn't just memorizing parts. He was studying behavior. During live fire exercises, he paid attention to how the weapon moved, how it shifted in his hands during automatic fire, how the recoil pattern changed between slow and fast settings. On slow, the weapon was controllable. Each burst pushed back against his shoulder, but he could compensate. Keep the muzzle relatively level. On fast, the muzzle climbed, just like the manual said, but Vance noticed something. And the climb wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic, it was consistent. Every time he fired on fast, the muzzle rose in the same pattern, same angle, same rate. The physics were predictable. The recoil impulse was constant, so the mechanical response was constant. The manual called fast fire uncontrollable. Vance began to think the manual was wrong. He started experimenting after hours. The range instructors allowed soldiers to practice during free time. Most men fired a few rounds for fun, then left. Vance stayed. He set targets at different heights. He practiced acquiring each one and firing short bursts. He studied where his rounds went. On slow, he could aim center mass and keep his shots grouped. On fast, aiming center mass, his first round hit the target. His second hit high. His third and fourth went above the target entirely. The manual was right. Standing fire on fast was inaccurate, unless you compensated for the climb. Vance lowered his aim point. Instead of center mass, he aimed at the target's lower third. He fired. The first round struck low. The second hit center. The third hit upper chest. A vertical line. 3 hits. Perfect distribution across the target's vital zone. Vance stared at the target for a long moment. The muzzle climb wasn't a flaw. It was a feature, if you knew how to use it. He refined the technique over weeks. The key was starting point. Aim at knee level. Let the recoil climb do the work. The burst would automatically stitch upward through the target's body. At close range, under 30 yards, 3 rounds would track from legs to torso to chest in less than half a second. Faster than any aimed shots. More devastating than a single hit. The physics were doing the aiming. Vance just had to point the weapon correctly at the start. He called it riding the recoil. The instructors called it unauthorized. That's not how the bar is meant to be fired, Private. You're wasting ammunition. Stick to the manual. Vance nodded. Said yes, Sergeant. Then went back to the range and practiced his technique until his shoulder was bruised and his ears rang despite the protection. His squadmates noticed the change over time. The anchor was hitting targets faster than anyone. His qualification scores were among the highest in the company. The jokes got quieter, then stopped. But training was training. Paper targets didn't move. They didn't shoot back. Vance wondered if his technique would work when it mattered. He was about to find out. November 1944. The Hürtgen Forest sat on the German border. 50 square miles of dense pine forest that American commanders expected to clear in 2 weeks. It took 5 months and cost more than 30,000 American casualties. The Germans called it the perfect defensive terrain. The trees grew so thick that American artillery and air support were nearly useless. Tanks couldn't navigate the forest floor. Supply lines stretched through narrow trails that became death traps. It was infantry warfare at its most brutal. Close quarters, limited visibility, constant ambush. The Americans called it the Green Hell. Vance's unit entered the forest on November 15th. 4 days of misery. Rain that never stopped. Cold that seeped through every layer. Visibility that dropped to yards in the thickest sections, and the Germans. Fallschirmjäger, paratroopers, held positions throughout the forest. Elite troops who knew the terrain. They had prepared fighting positions, registered mortar targets, seeded the trails with mines. Every American advance triggered an ambush. Every trail was a potential kill zone. By November 19th, Vance's squad had lost 2 men. Wounded, evacuated. The remaining 8 soldiers moved through the forest in a permanent state of exhausted tension. They were following a narrow game trail when point man signaled halt. Sergeant Morrison moved forward, whispered conference, hand signals. Something ahead. Movement in the undergrowth. The squad spread into a loose formation. On weapons up. Breathing slow. Vance was on the right flank. 3 yards off the trail. The BAR was heavy in his hands, 20 pounds that felt like 40 after 4 days of carrying it through hell. Then the forest erupted. Gunfire exploded from 3 directions. The Germans had let point man pass. Let the squad extend into the kill zone. Then opened fire from concealed positions that no one had spotted. Vance saw Morrison go down, saw the soldier next to him spin and fall, heard screaming, couldn't tell whose. He dropped to a knee, tried to locate targets. Muzzle flashes strobed through the trees, but the undergrowth was too thick. He couldn't see the shooters. Then movement. To his right, 3 German paratroopers rising from a depression in the forest floor. And they had been invisible, perfectly camouflaged positions when now they were flanking the squad, cutting off retreat, and they were 20 feet from Vance. The lead German saw him at the same moment Vance saw the Germans. Time dilated. That strange combat phenomenon where seconds stretch like hours. Vance registered details with impossible clarity. The German's Fallschirmjäger helmet. The MP-40 submachine gun swinging toward him. The way undergrowth and fallen branches made prone fire impossible. He couldn't drop to the ground. Couldn't deploy the bipod. Couldn't use the weapon the way the manual prescribed. He had to fire standing. He had to fire now. His thumb was already moving. The selector was on slow, the safe setting, the approved setting. No, slow wouldn't work. At 20 feet with 3 targets, and he needed volume of fire. He needed every round he could deliver in the next 2 seconds. He clicked the selector to fast, the forbidden mode, the uncontrollable setting. He brought the bar up, aimed at the lead German's knees, and pressed the trigger. The Browning roared. 3 rounds left the barrel in less than half a second. The muzzle climbed, exactly as the manual warned, exactly as Vance knew it would. First round caught the German in the thigh. Second round hit the stomach. Third round struck the chest. A vertical line of destruction stitched upward through the target. The German was falling before he could fire a shot. Vance was already pivoting. Muscle memory taking over, thousands of practice rounds guiding his hands. Second target, lower aim point, trigger press. 3 more rounds, the same ascending pattern, and the same result. Third target. The German was still bringing his weapon up. Not fast enough. Vance fired. 3 rounds, knees to chest, 5 seconds, 9 rounds, 3 German paratroopers down. The muzzle climb that every instructor called uncontrollable had just operated with surgical precision. The flaw in the weapon's design had become the most efficient killing mechanism on the battlefield. Vance stood in the sudden silence of his immediate area. The firefight continued elsewhere. Gunfire echoing through the trees, but his 3 opponents were no longer part of it. His hands were shaking. The adrenaline dump hit all at once. His vision tunneled. His breath came in gasps. He forced himself to stay upright, to scan for more threats, to keep the bar ready. The flanking attempt had failed, and the Germans had lost their cutoff element. The squad rallied, consolidated, pushed the remaining attackers back. When Sergeant Morrison, wounded but alive, found Vance, the private was still standing over the 3 downed Germans. "Vance, you hit?" "No, Sergeant." Morrison looked at the bodies, at the tight pattern of shell casings near Vance's feet, at the BAR with smoke still curling from the barrel. "Fast setting?" "Yes, Sergeant." A long pause. "Standing fire?" "Yes, Sergeant." Morrison shook his head slowly. "Manual says that's impossible." Vance finally lowered the weapon. His arms trembled with exhaustion and fading adrenaline. "Manual's wrong, Sergeant." Word traveled fast in a combat unit. By the next day, every BAR operator in the company had heard about Vance. "I'm the runt who dropped 3 Fallschirmjäger in 5 seconds." Standing fire. Fast setting. The technique that wasn't supposed to work. Soldiers started asking questions. How did he control the climb? Where did he aim? What was the timing? Vance taught anyone who wanted to learn. Aim low, ride the recoil. Let the physics work for you. Some operators adopted the technique. Others stuck with manual doctrine. Both approaches had their place depending on the situation. But nobody called Vance the anchor anymore. His new nickname was the point. Because when the squad needed to break contact or punch through resistance, they put Vance at the front, the smallest man in the unit, carrying the heaviest weapon, leading the way. Leo Vance survived the Hürtgen Forest, and he survived the desperate fighting in the Bulge when German forces launched their last major offensive. He survived the crossing of the Rhine and the final push into Germany. He came home to his family in Ohio in 1945, lived a quiet life, raised a family, worked as a machinist until retirement. When people asked about the war, if they asked, he rarely mentioned the 5 seconds that defined his service. He talked about the men he served with, the friends he lost, The cold and the fear and the exhaustion. The technique he discovered found its way into training eventually. Later generations of automatic riflemen learned what Vance figured out alone on a Mississippi firing range, that recoil patterns could be predicted and exploited. The manuals caught up to the reality. But in November 1944, in the green hell of the Hürtgen Forest, none of that mattered. What mattered was one soldier who refused to accept the limitations everyone told him were absolute. The instructor said the fast setting was uncontrollable. They were wrong. His squadmates said he was too small for the weapon. They were wrong. The manual said standing fire on fast would send his shots into the clouds. 3 German paratroopers learned otherwise. Sometimes the soldier who asks why, who questions the accepted wisdom, discovers something the experts missed. Sometimes the weapon everyone calls a flaw is a feature waiting to be understood. And sometimes the smallest man in the squad becomes the point of the spear. If this story of mastery, adaptation, and defying conventional wisdom resonated with you, hit that subscribe button now. In this channel, uncover the forgotten warriors of World War II, the soldiers who found new ways to fight when the manual said it couldn't be done. Drop a comment below. Would you trust your own technique against official doctrine when your life was on the line? Or would you follow the training manual? Share this with someone who understands that understanding beats size and mastery beats strength. And check the video on screen right now for another story of unconventional tactics that changed the battlefield.